Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Is it okay to start now? Do we have a quorum? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. We're open the meeting at 3:01. Do we have any public comments?
No public comments.
Thank you. We can move on to item 1, presentation and update on the 2020-2024 Resaca program performance.
Good afternoon, Mark Dombrowski, the Chief Operating Officer. I am here today to present on the Resaca program performance. And we're pleased to have today many of the men who are actually from the program. So if there's any questions, we have the experts here with us. And I want to thank all of them for taking the time off and coming here today.
Good, welcome.
So I wanted to cover a little bit about what actually happens in the Resaca program. So we have 4 main functions. So first is to divert the water from the Rio Grande into Resaca de la Guerra so that we can put that into water treatment plant number 2 using the weirs and pumps. We don't normally use the water from there, but it's more of a contingency. I think we used it once in the last year, but it's there in case we lose another source of water. And of course, we do the dredging operations on Resaca de la Guerra, which is where we store that raw water. So that is the function of our water supply. And those really benefit the utility and its customers. We also do a community benefit, which is we're dredging Resaca de la Guerra, Town Resaca, and Resaca del Rancho Viejo. And that really is to improve the water circulation, the environment around those Resacas, and support ecological improvements, which many of the grants support. And then, of course, within that group, we manage those grant opportunities with state and federal sources. And the main one during this last 5-year period we cover is the Restore grant that we worked on. Just to recap a little history, the idea of dredging the Resacas dates back at least to the late 1990s when the general manager noticed that a lot of sediment was building up in the bottom of our storage areas that we have to maintain for our TCEQ permit. And so they began an effort to try to figure out how to remove that sediment. In 2012, we began dredging operations, and most of the equipment was purchased between 2012 and 13. So the equipment you're going to see in these photos and the videos we have, 12 years old. And you'll see some of the videos. It's heavy equipment, and it's used almost on a daily basis, and it's coming to the end of its functional life here. And of course, the Restore grant we applied back in 2016. It wasn't awarded until 2020, which is the beginning window of this 5-year period. We've been dredging the town of Resaca in support of that grant. We just received a notice to construct here in November. We had originally anticipated to have that back in 2022. And of course, the Resaca fee was initiated in 2022, so prior to that, all of these operations were funded with water rate funding. So our current organization has 22 authorized full-time positions, so all the boxes in blue are funded with the Resaca fee. And while we have 22 FTEs, I think we have about 18 personnel now. We've always had a few vacancies. During the beginning of this 9-year period, I think we had 9 at the beginning, and we've been building up to meet the capacity needed for the dredging operations to support Restore and the Corps of Engineers and other dredging operations. So I've got some photos of some of the equipment we use here in our operations and some videos here. So, of course, we have our dredgers. We have two very large dredgers that we use. We also have a mini dredger. It has about 20% the capacity of the large dredgers. And we have a lot of equipment to remove the sediment and to dry it out and to remove the coarse material. We eventually take that material by truck and bring it out to the landfill where the city uses it for cover at the landfill. In addition to the specialized equipment, we use a lot of your typical type of construction equipment, excavators. We have 6 dump trucks, front loaders, dozers. So it's a lot of equipment. A lot of training goes to keep these things operating. So with that, we have a couple of videos I wanted to show you of the crews and work. Can you launch this for me? So this is the dewatering site where when the sediment is removed, it's put in here to dry out before it's removed, tested, and put it out to the landfill. We have one additional video that has a little bit of conducting the operations out on the water. So this is one of our larger dredgers there. And the buoys are holding up the pipe that runs the sediment back to the shore.
Mark, is it possible to get closer to the mic?
Yes,
Is,
that better?
thank you.
So you sift all the sediment?
Right, so that machine shifts the types of the size of the materials. Some of it goes straight to the landfill, some of it has to be separated out and dried. And that's the water going back into the Resaca. So I get a good sense of the scale of the operations and some of the difficulties. One of the things we don't have a video of, I wish we had, which is when things go wrong. So as I said, most of the equipment is about 12 years old, and you can see from those conditions, it's tough environment to work on. So the equipment it's failing, it's getting old. There's corrosion. It's almost constantly wet. The auger repair. So when we hit cabling and railroad ties, rebar, it gets caught into the dredger. We have to pulled out, stop operations repaired. Coarse debris, things like tires or railroad ties, cabling. Bicycles, I heard we had a washing machine once. Those have to get stopped and pulled out by hand. The auger trash, all those bags from the grocery stores you see blowing around the streets, a lot of them end up in the Resacas, and then they get wrapped around the auger that has been stopped and cleaned out by hand. One of my favorite pictures is the relocation of the dredger. It has to be lifted by, we have to rent a crane and move it from Resaca to Resaca. And when we do that, we have to move cabling over the roads and clear the roads and block off the roads. So it's not an easy task. And finally, a lot of the Resacas have sort of very confined segments. At one time, we had to have divers to go down and actually clear the dredgers. And, so it's a tough job. And as a result, it's not linear. And I'm going to get into one of the challenges we have with sort of hitting our performance measures. So if you look here,
Is it possible that he can have a mic, a clip-on?
is this not working? Because I sound like I'm screaming.
I find it hard to hear. We don't have any of those? Thank you. Sorry about that.
Try this. Is this better?
We'll see.
We'll see. So, as the last few years, we've worked around the town Rosaka area. So the months to dredge. That's that small section down there on the left side of the screen. It has, I think, 3 bridges, a couple of weirs, very confined area. 13 months of actual dredging to clear that area, and it was also interrupted by 7 months during COVID that we actually deployed the crews in other areas. Compare that to the St. Joseph of Rosaka. We completed all of that area in 19 months. You can see it's about 10 times the size and much wider. So it's not very linear when you're planning these operations, and that's one of the reasons why from year to year you'll see these performance measures change each year. So we went back into the budget books going back to 2000. I've captured all of the planned material dredge that we had planned, as well as the O&M expenses, the amount of capacity we gained. We're calling it drainage because, again, this is town Rosaka, which is not really used for all raw water storage, and then how those metrics came out. We took a lot of time analyzing what was going on with the year. So the first thing I noticed is that our O&M expenses, you can see it really ticks up after 2021. And that's because at that time, I remember I told you that we thought we'd get a notice to proceed for the restoration construction project. Well, it didn't happen in 22. Department of Treasury and TCEQ sort of deferred that approval. So we budgeted those dollars thinking that would happen the next year, so they budgeted again next year, then again the next year. So those dollars are rolling through those budgets, but the work was never authorized. We got our notice to proceed in November of 24. And because the budget book uses that total O&M number by the amount of dredging, as I pointed out earlier, dredging, the Rosaka is called Organization 3135. There's a lot of other activities going on in there. All that grant work, all those dollars flow through there. So it's picking up those dollars that aren't necessarily used for dredging. And that's one reason why you see these metrics really varying between each year. And of course, I think we overestimated. So you can see how each year we thought we'd accomplish more. One thing we should do with performance measures is always look back historically to look at your trends. As I pointed out, some of these areas are very difficult to operate in, and some of them which were wide open. So understanding which Rosakas we're going to dredge and some expected conditions might give us better heads up on what performance measures to set each year. So I think going forward, you're going to hear in the next strategic plan how we're using some of our own data to better gauge what our performance should be.
I see. So moving forward, you might make different decisions than what we saw in the previous slide with, one Rosaka that took
Right.
19 months versus another one that took
Right.
13 months.
I
Okay.
think the metrics are good. It's setting the targets. We didn't benchmark very well. And we also have dollars in here that have nothing to do with the actual dredging operation. So they're unrelated to that. So those two things make these metrics skewed. You can see that obviously we did not hit our marks there as we had planned. I think the bigger problem was when we set those targets that we should have done a little bit more homework in setting those targets. But I did go back, I sort of cleaned up the slide a little bit. So here are the actuals of what you achieved. Cubic yard. $3 per year, with the average at 84 weighted average. I compare that to the plan, put about 46. And so the metric was up. but we accomplished a lot of work. So we went out and measured it. We removed approximately almost 5,200 dump trucks loaded materials at Town Resaca. So that's a lot of material. And we probably do it pretty efficiently, but I can see where our performance measures don't necessarily capture that. We're going to do a better job in the future with performance management city metrics and reporting them. So some of the reasons why that we're not picked up in looking here, which is, of course, I mentioned that initial assumption that we would begin construction of Restore in 2022. That didn't get the notice until 24. We expect construction to start sometime in 25. So all of those costs associated that flowed through these metrics, and that skewed the actual performance. The next was a delay in plan from COVID pandemic that occurred during this 5-year window. We actually stopped crews from dredging for a while and deployed them elsewhere. And also that difference between the two dredgers, we don't necessarily account for that. So when we're using at St. Joseph's Resaca, it's wide open. We can use the larger dredger, and it removes more materials at the same time. In this more confined spaces, we use that mini dredger. It only has about 20% of the capacity. And one of the differences is that mini dredger, you have to tether it and use guide wires every time. So every time you make a pass, you have to reposition that. So it just takes a longer time to remove that sediment. Then, of course, we don't always know what's in the bottom of those Resacas until you actually get in there. And so as we find this coarse debris like rebar, railroad tracks, tires, not only does that break the machine, so they have to get repaired, but it just takes longer to remove that out of the Resacas. And it's worthwhile doing that, but it does slow us down. So in the future, when we're setting these performance measures, we should anticipate some of these conditions as we plan the work. So I think that's all I had for you. I was asked to look at that 5-year window, so hopefully it gives you a good picture. If you have any questions, we've got the excerpt behind us.
Thank you. This is very interesting information. I think all of us who live in Brownsville really value our Resacas. We understand that they're a treasure. They're habitat. They're an environment that is very rare, and it's worth maintaining it, because otherwise we will lose it, as it has been lost in other areas. The reason why I asked for this presentation is because I was really interested in again, how the program had been doing, what the goals were, and what was being accomplished, and to try and understand a little better the mission. So I don't know if we want to talk a little bit more about those goals, or if we want to talk about it as part of the strategic planning presentation.
Yeah, so we can talk a little bit more about better ways to set targets and goals, and we're actually doing that from a top-down approach. So like I said, I think the metric of how much does it cost us to remove a cubic yard of sediment is a good metric. It's an output metric. But I think we need to do a better job up front setting what those expectations are, how much we're going to remove at what cost, and think about that. So in the future, we're going to look at that across the organization. But I think we have some good metrics that you'll find in our budget book. We just have to do a little bit more homework in setting those and actually using them. I think a few notes here, which is, first is to, isolate the costs associated with the effort. So you're seeing cost flow through that has to do with construction and restoration, but we're applying it to dredging operations, and they're really not related. The next is that we should use our historical performance as a benchmark. So each year we should go back and look at what we did the previous year, what the difficulties were, what worked well, set new targets for the next year that we expect to accomplish. And finally, we should report our progress and analyze the variances. And so At the end of the year, we should figure out why is it we did or didn't hit our targets, and how can we reinforce our strengths to do better the next year. So that's more of a planning process. I think the day-to-day work that our Rizaka teams do is excellent. They work in a tough environment. They're doing a good job for the benefit of our community. So it's not on them, it's on us as we set these targets and taking into account the data that we do have and doing a better job of planning.
Right, and I think that being able to, yes, to accurately describe how much it is costing and how we can maximize what we're getting, but honing into what the benefit is that we're looking for, and how are the decisions being made as to where to dredge. I think those are all questions that I want to understand.
Sure, and part of those are politics. I said as I pointed out early on, portions of Rizaka de la Guerra are what we use to store water, and that's a function. We have to have water storage for our TC2 permit, and so that's done for the purpose of us being a water utility. Dredging the town Rizaka is really a community benefit. We don't store water there. We pump water in there, but it's not stored for our water plants. We can't use it once it's been in there. But those are for our community benefits and not necessarily for the water utility. And so which ones we dredge is really more of a policy call than a functional call for us. We're going to make sure that we have adequate storage to run the water utility. We'll make sure that happens. The rest of it, I think, is really a policy. I think, I don't know if Renee here, when we selected Town Rizaka, that had to do with the Restore grant. I wasn't here then, so I'm going to let him answer that the decision.
So initially, with the initial dredging, some of that you'll find even in the 2009 Imagine Brownsville book. There was discussion of the Town Rizaka Cemetery, Dean Porter Park. So there was, from my understanding, I wasn't there, those selections were made. But nevertheless, the Town Rizaka, there's multiple benefits to starting there. From a community standpoint, as in one, it had the most. It appeared to have the most sediment. The community, the businesses, the Dean Porter Park, the zoo. Some of it was also public property, starting at addressing Dean Porter Park, Cemetery, Rizaka. So I believe that's where the decision was made to begin with that at the Town Rizaka system.
And okay, so when I think of, again, like metrics and our goals for the program, one question I have is if for example that small Rizaka right next to the big one, what you showed in the slide, if that one takes a lot more to dredge, right, based on all these external factors, like was this chosen because there was a much greater benefit in terms of flood control?
Right, so all that water
or like
really
what,
is, right, so that's where stormwater runoff really occurs. This is also a part of the Restore grant, and that area that you're seeing in the circle has weirs that controls the flow of water in and out through that Rizaka. So it's a small area, but is a key area. And in order for that water to flow, we have to have those weirs to be able to operate.
Okay.
Yeah, I think what Renee mentioned too is something that was called Imagine Brownsville. I don't know if you remember that, but there was some strategic plan for the city. There was a lot of organizations involved. Wasn't part of the city, I don't think, but it was okay. So it was a strategic plan, and according to what Renee just said, that was part of the decision to start there was a result of that.
And looking forward, what would be the focus?
So right now, our crews are moving to Cromac. Are they there yet? So they're over here at Cromac. And so this is the area that we store water in. So now that we've completed the Town Rizaka area, and we've got the notice to proceed for the construction, Associated Restore, which is the bank restoration. They're going to start on that. We're going to go back to our water storage areas, which is the Cromac and the reservoirs. So that's where we're going to focus our next efforts.
Okay, and for this year, what is the planned drainage capacity that will be gained?
I don't have that for 2025. You have the budget?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
The plan going forward for 2025 is for our Resaca crews to focus on items that are highly needed by BPUB. And one of the projects, because of the drought, that we're focusing on is water reuse. The plan is to start working on a project for indirect potable reuse. And that means we'll be bringing the effluent water from Robindale plant south to water plant number 2, which is right behind us here. And a part of that will be bring it down, and it will blend with Resaca de la Guerra, which flows right by Price Road in the vicinity of Land O'Lakes. So from that area, from the Land O'Lakes and Price Road, it flows to back here on the other side of the railroad tracks and Home Depot. That is what we call, it's not Cromac School, it used to be the old Cromac property, so we refer to that as Cromac Resaca, that portion of it. We plan to dredge it, deepen it, so that it can have more storage capacity. When we bring the effluent from Robindale, it will blend, that is why it's called indirect, it will blend with the raw water in the resacas, then it will be coming in the way that we bring in water right now into water plant 2 to be able to treat it. So that is the plan. The crews will, it takes a while. We have to secure a dewatering site, and so we're in the process of obtaining an easement in the vicinity on the other side by Highway 48 and this Resaca right here. So once that is done, we're also, another thing is that some of our dewatering equipment will not survive the move, and so we are piloting a slightly different dewatering system to be able to dredge this Resaca. So that's, and then that's for one crew. The second crew will be focusing on dredging and cleaning out and also deepening our reservoirs right off of the river. Those have not been dredged since 2000, I believe, or 2010. So it's been 20 years since those have been dredged. And we anticipate probably having 7 feet of silt that we need to take out again so that we can have larger capacity water storage coming in from the river. So that's the plan, and it would probably take a little bit longer than a year. Probably looking at 1 to 2 years for both of those endeavors to be completed.
What about acre feet expected to gain?
I do not have what the acre footage will be, but we will work on that and present it to the board.
So the 22 people that, like we just saw the chart, the organizational chart of the Resaca program, all of them will be working on this?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, they're split into 2 crews. That was, I don't know, a year or 2 ago, the Resaca department was giving some additional employees, and he was able to create a second crew. And now they'll be able to use them at 2 separate locations. And is this grant funded? No. No, this has nothing to do with any of the grant funding. The grant funding that we have is 2 current projects. One of them is the Restore. That one is already been awarded to a contractor. That's when you go back to the slide in front of you, and the contractor is already on board. He's working on material submittals for the weirs and in the storm interceptors, the 10 storm interceptors that we're gonna construct around the St. Joseph, this area here. So that's one project. That's now the second grant that we got We haven't been given the funds yet, but we've been notified, is the Bureau of Reclamation, the $3 million for Resaca de la Guerra. Now, this Resaca de la Guerra is extremely on the west side of Brownsville, Alton Glore, Ortiz Elementary School, that proximity. The cost for that was anticipated to be $4.65 million. We have a grant for $3 million, so the difference will have to be paid by BPB, $1.65 million. But again, we're still in the process. They're going to have the BOR will bring us to the table and then formally award us that $3 million grant. So these two projects that I talked about, the deepening to bring the water reuse and the dredging at the reservoirs, those are not funded by grants.
Okay, so deepening for the water reuse, that's, funding for that is coming from the Resaca fee?
Yes.
How much would that cost?
We do not know yet. We don't have we're in the process of doing the feasibility complete study of the water reuse, what that will take, and we'll be able to figure out the acre footage of Resaca work and also the cost. One other item is that we also applied for a grant for the water reuse, but that's we applied for a $10 million grant. We're awaiting also the Bureau of Reclamation to see. Hopefully, we'll get some monies there. That's anticipated to be notified of that by March of this year. But again, that is for equipment for the rest of the construction project for the water reuse, not necessarily for the dredging.
Can you remind me of the purpose for water reuse?
Yes. Water reuse, we currently basically, I don't want to say it in this way, but we throw away 7 or 8 million gallons per day of water to the bay. And with the conditions that we're in because of the extreme drought, it's time for BPB to move towards applying water reuse to our system. Many other utilities have already begun, and this would literally provide 8 million gallons per day that could be treated. It could be raw water that could be treated for BPB to have that. That's basically the equivalent of another SRWA to be able to provide and create potable water for our customers.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it's the additional source that Mark mentioned, I guess, from the water strategy, right, the reuse.
Correct. All that is highlighted and broken down in that 2025 water strategy document that we provided to you last week.
So essentially, this last two projects that the crews are going to be working on are really for the system itself. It's not, it's to enhance the water system.
That's correct. So
Yeah.
we have, each plant has the capacity to treat up to 20 million gallons per day. And so the real restriction is the ability to bring water in. And as we get less water coming out of the Rio Grande, we're looking for alternative sources. So indirect potable reuse is an alternative source.
I guess going back to the first slide where you had the 4 different categories, it's the first category.
That's correct. So we will now be able to divert water from Robindale as well into Resaca de la Guerra and run it through our water treatment plant number 2.
Just making sure I understood.
I'm a little confused as to why the Resaca fee is being used to improve our water system that we then, charge customers to to get?
Sure. So when the Resaca fee was adopted in '22, it was really for three purposes, as identified in the ordinance. One was for dredging operations, one's for the restoration, the Corps of Engineers, and for the restore. So it's one of the designated three purposes for the Resaca fee.
And at that point, if I'm not mistaken, the cost of the Resaca management program was excluded from the ratepayers.
That's correct. So the costs associated with the leadership, the management, the administrative overhead, all of that is absorbed through water. So Renee, Marie's salary, none of that comes out of Resaca fee. None of the cost of these buildings come out of the Resaca fee. It's just for the direct costs associated with dredging, restore, and the Corps of Engineers.
Yeah, I guess on the next slide, it's on the bottom,
Correct.
where it says Resaca operations funded from BPUB water rates. So that was being paid by the water rates. And then into 2022, when we started the Resaca fee, then that cost was shifted to the fee
Correct. They
as part
took
of
those
it.
costs out of what would otherwise been recovered in water rates, would have increased those water rates. They moved it over to the Resaca fee and recovering it through that fee.
When are we reevaluating water rates?
We still have two more rate increases that are going to be coming into effect. One in 2025, I think 2026 will be the last rate increase. So we, at that point, I guess, or right before we implement that last rate increase, we can go out and submit or issue out an RFP for a new water rate study.
Who ultimately makes a decision or recommendation on water increases, the PUB or the city of Brownsville?
Well, we would do the cost of service, bring it to the board for a recommendation, but it's the city commission that actually approves the rates.
Do you think the current cost of service accurately estimates the cost?
Yeah, I mean, they used the estimates that were provided by the Corps and the Restore Grant and our ongoing dredging operations were included in that study. As we know, those costs were escalated due to inflation. Those inflationary factors were not included in that study.
No, I mean the water rates.
Or the water rates.
Yeah.
Do they accurately, yeah, anything other than the Resaca? Yeah, the Resaca, as Mark mentioned, was separated and then recovered through the Resaca fee.
Okay. Okay, thank you. We can move on to the next item if nobody else has any more
Mark, let me
questions.
just request something from Ms. Gilbert, your staff. On the 22 employees that are currently working with the Resaca program, could you provide the board, Marilyn, with their salary schedules? From the
Yes, we can
top
do
to the
that.
bottom,
We'll do that, yes.
all the individuals.
And just be clear, there's 22 FTEs, which are, they're not actually employees yet. So we have 3 or 4 open positions.
Okay.
Yeah, and just maybe on the data, on the information, the expenses you have, you can also include the number of head count, right? You started off with 9, now we're at 22. That would be nice. And then on the org chart, if it makes sense for you, divide it into 2 crews, just so we see which, I don't know if that maybe applies in the short term. I don't know if that's going to continue in the future, but at least to give us visibility of the organization.
Right. We can give you a further breakdown on that.
Is it okay to get this information by email? Like we don't need another presentation, right?
No, I don't need a presentation.
Right.
We'll take care of that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Just for clarity, so just to make sure, this is the only 2 items that we need pending, that we need to provide is the 9 employees in the short term and the feasibility and the breakdown. This last is the only action item that we need to do via email to provide you.
From my side, yes.
I couldn't hear what you said.
What are our action items, so that way our staff is responsive and ensures that we provide you all of the information.
Where one was the salaries, one was.
Yeah, I was
the
just
break-
saying include the head
separate it.
count on the chart, and then on the org chart, just divide it into the 2 crews that you normally use.
Thank you.
Other than that, again, I guess all the team is here, so thank you very much. I think as Daisy mentioned in the beginning, right, the Resacas is an important part of the community, and we appreciate all the work that you guys do for that. So thank you.
Thank you. We can move on to item 2, presentation and update on 2025-2026 strategic plan progress.
It's me again. So we asked for an update on sort of what the current strategic plan process is. So we're highlighting what the purpose of. So we really think strategic planning is a very important process to not only give us direction, because it's going to come from all the stakeholders, including the board, but also help us to allocate resources to the priorities that we've established, enhance performance. So by when you tell us what's important, we'll be able to measure that and report back, as well as stakeholder engagement to get people involved. So the board, the commission, our community partners. So we have the current plan is from 2019 to 2024. That was the plan that I think most of you participated in. We were doing an update with a consulting firm called Raftellus. And that was being managed by HR at the time. We've decided to cancel that update. We just did not think that there was enough benefit for the effort that was going into it and to reduce funds. We stopped the contract. Last June, the strategic planning function was moved from HR over to my group, operations, and so we picked that up. And since June, July timeframe, my staff and I have been working on really developing a performance management framework and data automation. In order for us to really manage a strategic plan, we had to have those functions in place first. So we made pretty good progress on that. We've also been working on an RFP that we're going to issue late January, early February, and sort of that 2-week time frame, for a consultant who has expertise in strategic planning for utilities to come in and assist us. We think it's about a 7-month process. My experience, we hope to have a kickoff in late March, early April timeframe to have that strategic plan complete.
So completed when? Can you say that again?
Well, about 7 months. So if we start in, say, April 1st, should be done. I don't do math in public, but 4 plus 7, 11, November.
11 November?
Yeah. So, like I said, we've just about got the statement of work complete, and we are following what I consider best practices for a utility. So here's a statement of work, some of the things that we're going to expect a consultant to assist us with. So first is the project management, make sure it stays on time, on budget. Stakeholder engagement, facilitate those meetings. We're going to utilize a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, very common in utilities. They're going to help us with a strategic framework. We're going to look at our vision, mission, and values, make sure that those are aligned. Key strategic outcomes, selection and prioritization. We've already done a little work on that. Key performance indicators, as well as the targets. I think this is some of, Dr. Zamora, what you're talking about is, are we using the right targets? So we're going to work on that. We're going to align the programs, projects, and initiatives under the, we're already doing a lot of things. In fact, it may tell us to stop doing some things. So we're going to make sure that those are all in alignment. We're going to have an implementation plan as well as financial impacts of these decisions. And finally, a strategic plan delivery and presentation to the board and probably the city commission. One thing that we have not done in the past is we're really looking to have like 3 sections of the strategic plan. So while we're one utility, we really have 3 very distinct businesses: electric, water, and wastewater. A lot of things differ between them. The regulatory environments, the technology, the constraints, different employees, different training requirements. So we really think we have to have sort of different strategies for each of these. There's certainly going to be overlap, but we think we need to analyze each of these, the SWOT analysis on each of these segments in order to have an effective strategic plan. We've already identified what we believe are some likely strategic outcomes. This list will probably get pared down or augmented, but we've identified safety, financial health, customer satisfaction, efficiency, employee satisfaction, resiliency and reliability, environmental stewardship, regulatory compliance, and affordability all should be key in our list of what we want to see the outcomes are of the strategic plan. We've also identified performance metrics. We are breaking our utility down into what we call sort of operating functions and management and support functions, analyzing what each group does to contribute to our mission, and then we'll have performance measures around each of those that more align with what the actual work is performed. Some of the work we've done here with an operations group is this year we created these 9 strategic outcomes. We've also already identified 22 key performance indicators for our utility. I've listed some up here that are associated with resilience and reliability. So we have plant availability, so this is our power plants, our water plants, or our wastewater treatment plants. SAIDI, safety, and CAIDI all are associated with our transmission distribution system. Water system integrity and wastewater system integrity, those are associated with those utilities. We've identified targets that we're trying to achieve each of those. And from the 2025 budget, we've identified projects and programs that you have approved funding for, and we have aligned those with each of those, which if we complete those projects, they should influence and move the needle to make those metrics move in the right direction. The other thing we've done is we've been very specific on how we measure these. This gets back to your point, which is just taking the total budget and dividing it by an output might not give you the number you want. So we've worked with a number of outside organizations to identify metrics that not only can we benchmark internally for our own historic trends, but against ourselves in the industry. So things like plant availability, the EPRI, or Electric Power Research Institute, has metrics on that. SAIDI, which is the System Average Interrupted Duration Index, those are measured against the APPA utilities. And water system integrity, we have data from the American Water Works Association. So we'll be publishing that data, not only our performance trends, but as well as how it compared to the industry. And we'll be using very specific measurement formulas to make sure that we're measuring the same way all the other utilities are measuring it, and we're measuring the same way year after year, so that the metrics are comparable, which is one of the problems you saw earlier in that Resaca, where it's very hard to look at from one year to the next. So with that, we expect this RFP to go out within the next few weeks. We're going to have the planning process, we think about 7 months, but we're going to hold off on giving the exact timeline until we've had some assistance from that consultant who's done this multiple times to help develop that time frame. We're going to utilize a SWOT analysis approach. And then internally, we continue to work on this performance management framework and data automation to complement the strategic planning, so that when that strategic plan finally gets adopted and you tell us to go, we'll have the ability to manage ourselves and to measure ourselves against that in place.
Thank you. The reason I asked for this update is because to me, a strategic plan is at the core of everything an organization does. I think that if we are able to come up with guiding principles, then really everything, every decision that gets made can flow from that. And I would love to have a great strategic plan that can actually be followed, that has goals, that has something to aspire to. I actually did not realize that Reftelis last year was not doing a 5-year strategic plan. So it was supposed to be an update for 1
Right.
year or less than 1 year?
So Reftelis was a consultant who worked on the 2019 to 2024 strategic plan. Then they were brought back in to do an update. And that's what they were working on last year. I think that was delayed because of the COVID period. But they came in last year, and they really focused on some of the mission, vision, value statements, a few other areas. We decided that going forward, that probably our best time was not spent working with Reftelis on that, but rather to focus on a new strategic plan that might have a little more meat to it.
Mark, y'all are still looking at, in the past, we've discussed the fact that selling electricity is our major component, and then we have water, and then we have the wastewater. The water sales don't make enough money, to take care of their bills. Have y'all looked at breaking these down, all three of these, and what's the cost to manage them, and what is the return? Of course, we're not making any money from the ratepayers. It's all the pass-through.
That's correct. It's a public utility. We don't make money. We don't lose money. Our job is to manage risk for our customers. Right. So yes, we have been looking at that. I know Mike's looking at separating electric, water, and wastewater. The whole notion of a cost of service is there.
Right.
Doing an indirect cost allocation amongst the three utilities, and then bringing that. You can't just flip a switch and do it overnight. It has to be a gradual. But we are looking at that and operating them. We will always have a shared overhead. We don't need 3 finance groups, 3 HR groups. Those will all be shared resources. So those costs should be allocated based upon each of those utilities' use. But each utility should be recovering its own cost of service.
Okay, thank you.
And I know that this is barely getting started, right? So as we enter the strategic plan process, I'm sure there's going to be meetings and discussions and so on. But just quick food for thought, cost of service to the ratepayer might be a metric or variable that we could consider. I know there you have service levels on performance management.
Right. So we have affordability. I think one thing we look at is
Oh yeah, I see it there in the bottom, okay.
not so much rates, but
Yeah.
can our customers afford the service?
And
that
then
we provide?
I know it's going to be a RFP. How do companies hear about it? I mean, how can a company bid for this?
Sure. So we'll post it in our normal processes, but we will actually seek out and contact consulting firms. Diane's not here, but there's a code for consulting that does this. So we'll advertise, we'll call these consultants, tell them this RFP is available, and we'll solicit them to respond to that.
Very good.
Okay, looking forward to it. I think it's going to be very good. As Daisy mentioned, this is at the core of what we do, right? And I think it's important for us to have that reference, especially given the changes that are happening in our community, in the market. We need to have our North Star, right? So we should always go back to the strategic plan, say this is what we said, this is what we're going to do, this has higher priority than this, to help us make those decisions and make sure that we can continue being of service to the community.
Absolutely. I think it's important to have goals that are achievable, to not just, have sort of goals in the abstract, but to be able to work as a team to achieve. And I think I applaud you for everything that you've been doing for data automation and to be able to collect these improved metrics. I think that's going to be key moving forward. So thank you. Any other questions?
No, thank you.
Can we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.